board on this computer. Wonderful. And we are here today for the second Legacy and Legal podcast. My guest today is Mr. Michael Goodenough. And he's not just good enough, he's great enough. And we are so happy to have you here. I know everyone is going to learn so much wonderful information from you about what you're doing in the state of Massachusetts, the state of Connecticut, and your amazing career in the cannabis and hemp industry, which is been for the better part of a decade. So Mr. Michael Goodenough, how are you doing this morning?
I'm great. Thanks, Ellen, for having me. What a wonderful thing this podcast is, and um, it's a great thing to be here with you.
Well, we are honored to have you. And I was wondering, tell me a little bit about your career. What got you started in cannabis? What got you started in hemp?
Agriculture in general. I mean, obviously, we were active. Active. You and I were activists that have been running around for the longest time, trying to just bring normality to cannabis in general. So I think it was part and parcel a quest between the two. But realistically, the answer is it was the Department of Agriculture's most valuable crop at the time. And so we were doing a lot of hydroponic lettuce, a lot of hydroponic tomatoes, and really looking to evolve the agricultural world or what we were doing or our impact to it. It's real hard to survive on a 49-cent piece of, head of lettuce. And so you look to the more profitable crops. And, at the time, hemp was absolutely going to be the most profitable crop there was. And so we jumped in head first. Plus, in the state of Connecticut, you had to actually be within the industry for 5 years in the very beginning of the licensing. So if you weren't in the industry for 3 to 5 years, then you weren't going to be available for a license. So we jumped into hemp to really start the foundation of our cannabis knowledge in an active practice of farming.
Oh my gosh, I love that. In the state of Connecticut, you hold a license for both cultivation and extraction at your wonderful farm.
Yeah, we are the first extraction company in the state of Connecticut, and we're still here. We also do manufacturing of products, so we have about 80 different brands across the country that we support. In fact, global now. We have folks in Israel and folks in Brazil, so we have brands in both. So we hit a global level of product drive and are actually picking up a bunch of customers from both. So we manufacture as a cosmetics and human consumable company, licensed through DCP. And then we have the hemp farming. So we had about 40 farmers in the state that we're still engaged with in the concept of how to farm cannabis in general, and working with about 5 different major universities on things like what botrytis is native to New England and all the different farms that are out there, and how we can build resistance to that specific botrytis so that we effectively can be more diverse in what kind of crops we grow out here in the state. I think, obviously there's certain genetics and certain cultivars that were created for each location that they became incredible at. And the goal would be able to grow any. But, we have our certain conditions with our light, and we have our certain conditions with the bugs and other things that we have. So the more we can combat that's native to here, the better off it'll be for us to be able to kind of cultivate through the years.
Oh my gosh, and cultivate through the years you have, my friend, and that's incredible. So starting in Connecticut, going nationally, globally, and then in different levels of academia. So wherever there is a need for cannabis knowledge and agriculture, advocacy, product manufacturing, and so many different facets, that is where you find our wonderful friend, Mr. Michael Goodenough, which is why I thought you'd be an incredible person to talk to in the Legacy and Legal podcast because I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes on the legislative terrain, and especially with right now, it is December 19, 2023, that we are recording this. We're going to post it tomorrow, 12/20/23. And with that in mind, what is going on right now with the state of Connecticut and our wonderful hemp farmers? How is their experience right now going with the different regulations and the importance of having a community, even though you might be an individualized business?
As frustrating as Connecticut is, I think there's two very diverse sides to what we're talking about. There's the federal level. So the USDA has been extraordinary. We actually got a tissue culture grant this year, well, actually 2 years back, that we just finished this year. And that grant was made available to us to deal with tissue culturing to try and make it more cloning more available for our farmers, so that we're not feminizing, not GMOing, but we're actually sending out clones of genetics that we know are successful. And so, I think on a federal level, the USDA and even the Small Business Alliance or the Small Business Administrations offer so much strength and grants and funding and guidance and support towards our farmers. And if farmers are out there doing hemp, they need to look up the local USDA grants that are available. I beg you. At the same time, the reality is that, from a small business perspective, there's lots of aid and assistance. But all of that takes time. And I think the new laws that just crossed our plate don't give us any time. And so even though the state has some type of capabilities for businesses, and although agriculture has some type of support for farming, and we can use those as CBD or hemp, at the end of the day, it's too late, right? This state has now prevented us from being able to put more than 1 milligram in any consumable, which really isn't problematic, to be quite frank with you. But what becomes problematic is that now we're not allowed to put more than 25 milligrams in any tincture. As far as a topical, we're not allowed to have anything more than 5 milligrams in the total container, which means anything over 350 milligrams worth of full spectrum now becomes illegal in the state, which means Charlotte's Web, if they were driving a truck across the state and they were delivering products from one state to another state and had to transport across our federal highways or our state highways that are federally funded by the hemp bill, it's actually illegal. So the product that started started this whole drive, Charlotte's Web, is now illegal in the state. That's the audacity of what they've gone and done. Furthermore, they're starting to play games with like CBN. They're trying to play games. The Department of Consumer Protection is starting to play games saying CBN is a direct derivative of THC and is not going to be recognized as a hemp cannabinoid. And so it's ludicrous. What's happening in this state, as far as Connecticut is concerned, is insanity. We're still being controlled from a THC perspective by 4 main growers, 5 now, but honestly, it was TheraPlant who went bankrupt, and then the company was purchased by another big. So it doesn't change. In this state, there's a complete outage. We have no more flower. Only thing available are pre-rolls right now. And so, there is no collaboration. Even the people that were smalls, the moms, the pops, the shops, they're being completely cut out of the equation, which is literally the opposite of what's happened in Mass, right? In Mass, there's an amazing collaboration between mom and pop, small startups, people who are just wanting to create a brand and bring that brand to market all the way through. It's a true melting pot where you can only own 3 dispensaries and you can only own a grow facility or multiple, but they equal the same size as your competitor. There is no one who can dominate the market. And, conspiracy theorists inside of us always says, well, the big 4 right now in Connecticut are just not releasing flower. They're keeping it in order to drive the cost and drive the inflation variable.
Wow.
Right? So as long as they're making their money. And so, I think if we had an open outlet to communication, if we had an open outlet to working with these organizations, if everybody was able to really get together and discuss an idea of how to become this properly over the course of a year to 2 years. Some of these folks have been fighting for 3 years for their license. The amount of money and time it takes for 3 years, and we know in Mass, because that's what it cost us for Mass. But at the same time, there was structure. There was achieve this and this is next, and then achieve this and this is next. Here, there's no structure. There's no end game. It's everybody's really fighting to just try and accomplish getting there without any real direction. And so they're starving along the way, which impacts your credit, which impacts everything. And in both states, even though Mass is killing it, and we have our beautiful dispensary in Becket, Mass, Himalayan High, the reality is again that federal side comes into place as far as not allowing us to have real banking, not allowing us to have real outreach through marketing appropriately. If there weren't things like your podcast, people wouldn't be able to get a true message, and so I think we still have massive, massive issues on a compliance level where, I mean, it costs us 1% just to move our cash from a safe to the bank. 1%. It's insanity. And, I think it brings about things and complexities that even a small business, somebody just starting up, don't understand how to traverse. And then all of a sudden they have their merchant account shut down, and not only their merchant accounts, but their bank accounts, and then their credit cards. And then their personal credit is affected because of the shutdowns and the pieces that are happening. And it becomes very frustrating. And I mean, at the end of the day, you've done the greatest education platforms in multiple states. And just hosting those platforms oftentimes can become an issue. And so I think we're fraught with issue of groups not working together, period, federal and state.
Absolutely. And in the state of Connecticut, I apologize. In the state of Connecticut, there didn't become a governing body for your cannabis industry. It still goes to the Department of Consumer Protections, as we're in Massachusetts. And most states adapted and then created their own governing body to oversee these programs, because it takes so much to properly roll this out, because this needs to be something that has 150% of your focus, not just a part that you can delegate from the Department of Consumer Protections. The Department of Consumer Protections in Connecticut was never set up for the ability to oversee all of these licenses, programs, and the infrastructure of this coming to fruition. So because there's such a big disconnect between licensing types, whether it's cannabis, hemp, with the Department of Consumer Protections, I was trying to explain to people what had happened to your business and other businesses, where you were literally in a position where this date, this time, the regulations changed, and anything that was over that 5 milligrams per package, you had to physically take it off your shelves. And it's not something that you can send back to the distributor. It's just profit lost. And if you had
Yep.
renewed recently, you were out maybe, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that is your
Yep.
inventory for the year that has a great shelf life. So if you had bought in bulk, you had thrown away your product in bulk. There was nowhere you couldn't give it away, you couldn't sell it. It's just you had to get rid of it. So that definitely probably prompted the want for more smaller cultivators and businesses to start working together. So I know you've been working on the Connecticut like Business Alliance. So how has that been going, working with all the different farmers, realizing if there's a disconnect between the state and the licensees? Because I'm correct that they didn't reach out to you as one of the first licenses in the entire state of Connecticut, as one of the very, like, number one extractor, one of the first hemp cultivator license. I think you were like, what, number three, but who's counting? Top three,
Two,
number
number two.
two,
Yeah. Number
even
two.
better,
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, number one, number two in the state, they didn't reach out to you and say, hello, Mr. Goodenough, we're thinking about changing these regulations. Would this be advantageous? Would this be detrimental?
No.
Or was it, here's a letter in the mail, and just a lack of communication?
Look, we formed CHIA, the Connecticut Industrial Hemp Association, and we did that very specifically, really to focus on hemp, to focus on the hemp farmer, to focus on the farmer being able to get their product to market. And so we've been lobbying for years now with that whole effort. And we get told so many things along the way, like we're going to be able to grow, and then we're going to be able to do, and then the last minute it all gets pulled out of the bill, every bit of it. So it's to me, they're doing nothing but dangling a carrot so you don't cause problem. And then they're yanking that carrot away, and they're leaving you with absolutely nothing. And they're handing all the business to the large size corporations, all of it. And so, this year I'm not buying it. This year I was exceptionally frustrated, and I was sick of speaking for just the hemp farmer, because it's the CBD small businesses. My store in Meriden is struggling radically right now. We had 4 CBD shops closed down this month alone within organizations that I know and I understand. And so literally people have taken their lives and dedicated them to a location thinking this dream was going to be successful for them. And here the government has stripped that completely away. Thank you so much for the small business and the job that you put in there and the taxes that you've been paying, but we're going to rip this out from underneath you, leave you hanging. And yes, for those of us that were legitimate, we stripped this stuff off our shelves. We had to.
Wow.
Legally, my employees are at risk if DCP comes in and they're selling a product that has now been deemed illegal. I can't leave them at risk. Most shops, they left their stuff on the floors, and they're going to take the fine or they're going to take the punch in the nose. And realistically, the goal of that was to remove from the gas stations the illegal products that were being sold, because the gas stations didn't understand what the difference between 25 milligrams of CBD are comparatively to 25 milligrams of red dye number whatever. It's not their job to know. Their job is to trust their distributor who's bringing the products to them, trust their distribution organization to give them products that are fully legal and approved by the Department of Consumer Protection. And to your point, their only job is to protect the consumer. Their job is not to control the entire motion of the industry. And furthermore, these laws that are punching us in the nose come directly from DCP. They're not the law creator. They're the ones that are there to actually make sure it is enforced. And so why they're writing laws now that, and I know that the general counsel has to be, there's recommendations that have to come appropriately, but those recommendations were taken as absolution, and they were taken as the direction that was going to be followed. And there was no pre-negotiations or discussions on what is the impact of that choice to those local businesses. All they wanted to do was get THC out of the gas stations and make sure it got put into a regulated space and protect the consumer. And for that, I understand. For that, I totally agree. People have to have access to things that are safe unless they're going to a place that is specific, like a dispensary. And I get it. But that doesn't mean you change the federal hemp law and now cripple an entire industry that you've supported or told you were going to support for the longest time, you know? So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. And there were different ways that they could have done that. They could have taken the punitive measure to the gas stations for not having a hemp license, for not being a regulated store. It doesn't make any sense to punish you who has a license, who does a batch number, who does testing, who does all the different things to stay in compliance with the state, because you are registered with the state. So they told you that the products you could create, you no longer could sell, which is completely absurd. So do you think that
Sure.
the Oh, absolutely. Absurd and in many ways detrimental. People have lost their livelihoods. People are hurting. It's the 19th. We're going to post this on the 20th. That's 5 days before Christmas. And this happened to you guys a little bit before Thanksgiving. So right around the
Yep.
holiday season, that was quite a low blow from the Department of Consumer Protections in the state of Connecticut. That's the governing
Yep.
body for your hemp program. Do you think that the governing body has been listening and hearing what the hemp farmers are saying, the outcries of where we're losing our business, we're losing our livelihood, as much as you have to protect, and rightfully so, the consumers? What about protecting those that have started businesses and those that are doing everything to the letter of the law?
I think this becomes again that disconnect in government, right? So farmers are supposed to be federally protected, right? If we can't grow food on the next world war, we're all going to starve. And so farmers and farmland are a federally protected component. But this is state making law, state making decisions. And so the threat, the protection that we as farmers have always had of you're preventing a farmer's right to farm, you're preventing, that's gone. That's gone because it's hemp or it's cannabis or it's a preparation or a plan for hemp or for cannabis. And so at the end of the day, we have no power. And so they're not listening to us. They could care less about us. They literally could care less about us. What they care about is how much money they're going to be making off of the dispensary's taxes. And they care about moving it to recreational because recreational is the only place they're actually getting heavy duty tax. And so the big push was turn all of the medical into recreational so we can take the flower that's being grown for medical and put it into recreational. It was a tax flush. They were flushing for the tax as deep as they could, and they wanted to do nothing to disrupt the impact of the return on investment that would be made from a tax-based perspective. And they didn't care about anything. Furthermore, if you really read the law, what happened in Connecticut, they made synthetics legal.
Yeah, they did.
Dispensaries are now allowed to make synthetics, or not a dispensary, a cannabis licensed organization can now make synthetics. So that opens up every single pharmaceutical to move into Connecticut, file for the next round of licenses, and start making synthetic drugs out of our cannabis.
It's not Connecticut is, for those that aren't really familiar with the state of Connecticut, Connecticut is a state that is very much in, is very much enveloped in the pharmaceutical, industry. There are a lot of different pharmaceutical companies, and it's sure that when you
Yep.
look at where lobbying dollars went, you could see where the direct correlation was between these kinds of things transpiring and who actually was able to get the ear of the legislators and talk with those that are making the decisions. Those are conversations that you would not be privy to unless you were able to offer something in the way of funding, or unless they opened the door and said, come on in. So I think that
Yep.
there's a huge need in Connecticut for those in charge, whether it is the Department of Consumer Protections or people within your legislation, to be able to have these conversations with your small farmers, with your CBD businesses, and with your groups and your coalitions of people that are actually there on the ground. It is bewildering and perplexing to me that they wouldn't ask the people with the licenses, whether it's, cultivation or extraction, what do you think? And it just shows
Yep.
that how far the disconnect is. So, are we, what are we looking for in 2024? Has there been any movement? Has there been anything that might show that, hey, maybe the door is starting to crack open a little bit? Maybe we could get our foot inside, anything like that, or we're just going to keep
No, it's
fighting
going to
this
get
good
worse.
fight?
It's going to get worse. They're
Yeah.
actually going to control CBD. From the way I understand it, they're actually going to try and control all cannabinoids. You have to be licensed. You have to have bud tenders. No one's going to be able to sell hemp or hemp derived products unless it's through those organizations, which is absurd. My store can't afford to send, my people are trained well, that. But at the end of the day, the average store owner can't send that employee who to a hemp training course in order for them to get educated to sell the one product that's sitting on the shelf there. And then they have to staff that person or those people on a consistent basis. You understand the plausibility of educating a group rapidly. So you would be the best one to kind of define whether this could be accomplished. But think about the costs that go behind it. Think about the fact that I could lose that employee at any point. It empowers them to be more valuable than someone else and creates division within the ranks unless I'm going to do it to everyone. It's asinine. It's asinine, and it's continued. But that is why we formed the Connecticut Cannabis Small Business Alliance, because the Small Business Alliance is focused on bringing people who are in textiles, bringing people who are merchant accountants, bringing people who are tire companies that are putting tires on the vans that are going to be driving the cannabis. Bringing anyone associated to cannabis should be involved with the Connecticut Cannabis Small Business Alliance in order to bring their voice to a larger group. They stopped listening to the farmer. They divided everybody and they split them into these little rooms, and they said, oh, you're going to be able to have a license here through the lottery, and ooh, you're going to be able to have this, and ooh, you might be able to do this. They split everybody apart so that there was no strength within the numbers of who was voting and who was voicing their opinions. And I'm done with it. And so that's why we formed the Connecticut Cannabis Small Business Alliance, because it's time that we bring the voice back to the body of the people, not the individual segment that doesn't have the strength to stand alone.
Absolutely. And as I was listening to you, Mike, I was like, once a Marine, always a Marine. So adaptable. That's what it is. You're like, you know what? Okay, so this is no longer going to be something that I can do. How do I adapt? How do I pivot? How do I
Absolutely.
continue to stay adaptable in an ever-changing terrain? So, thank you very much for your service. And with your companies, thank you. There's always a really important focus on making sure to give back to veterans and first responders. And with your company, whether it's Sweetheal, Himalayan High, the importance of hiring from demographics that are getting into cannabis, that definitely need people, to make sure that we're looking out for our veterans, our first responders, and finding, a healing space for them, a good space for them to work and be able to create a livelihood. So all the people you hire, I know that you hire with the idea of, if you want to work here forever, we'd love to have you here forever.
It's true. I think we have lots of college students because I'm hemp, and hemp is not advertising to minors, which these are the next big executives. These are the next people who are going to be the CEOs of their own companies. And so we're lucky to integrate with the current knowledge and then give them a real life, working skill set. First responders, they're dealing with what us veterans dealt with from a combat perspective every day, every single day. And so they're constantly, the concept of PTSD means it's a post traumatic situation. If they're constantly still living in a traumatic situation, it never gets to post. And so for those people, healing is just as important. It's important for everybody, right? But at the end of the day, I think a lot of we zoom in on a lot of different people's individual needs, because they're all very different. If we look at a lot of the people that come to us that either have health issues or something that inhibits them to a normal career or normal job. Whether we have folks that had just never been given a chance and want to tap into something, we always push our people to push new brands, to come up with come up with their own brand and their own products that mean something to them, to get more out of the industry than just working a 9 to 5. For those veterans or those first responders, it's a lot about healing and giving life back, and giving life back through the plant. Everybody has their own story and everybody has their own way to express and get acclimated to this plant, and learn. And that's the thing, because they see it through their own crystal. And when they see it through their own crystal, the light reflects differently for them. And then you can learn from them and their experience.
Oh, that's such a wonderful analogy. I've never heard that analogy before, but that's completely right. When you look at a crystal, you can see something new through one of the different prisms. And speaking of,
Yeah.
complexity and diversity, is there, with all your time in the cannabis industry and the hemp industry, is there one spot that might stay, a sweet spot for you? Is it academia? Is it actually, being with the plant, making the extract, coming up with, the different products that you're going to be making? Is there any one part of this or multiple parts of this? Like what, continues to inspire you? What makes you the most happy of all these different, or is it a combination of getting to do everything at once?
Yep. It's all of the above. So I mean, I think, look, I was a Marine, right? And when I came home, but we did college courses when we were overseas and all the others. College just wasn't for me at that age. At that age, my brain was very different and in a very different place. And so, although I have lots of credits that are under my belt, it never kept me. It never captured me. It never became something I was ambitious towards. So the academia side now is huge for me. These are the years that I would have thrived in college. And so I think it's just different types of people in general. So I'm loving that side of it for sure, but it also validates, and it's an even platform right now. Like anyone can sit at the table and have a conversation. You can be a PhD or can't spell it because you have a learning disability that prevents you from being able to be a good speller. It doesn't matter who you are sitting at that table. Everyone is equal. And that's the true foundation of the melting pot, right? That's what America is incredible at. And so I thrive off of the birth of the new industry and the collaboration that comes from that. It's when people start putting up walls and being better than one another and start having to impress people with some badge that they're wearing or something else, that's where problems arise. And so right now it's free. It's free in its exploration.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And with exploration, I love how many different things that you're doing and different people that you're helping to inspire and shape generations. Are you still doing something where college students can come and volunteer or do I don't know, I apologize, is it research or volunteer hours? Can you explain that program a little bit more? Pretty please?
Yeah, I mean, we pay our interns. We're not we I can't you can't I yeah you can't ask people to work real hard for nothing, right? You so anyway, but we also have a program where people can come in and they can just work with some of those other college students, and they can do some hands-on pieces and get some experience with the plant. But I think we are a stepping stone in the sense that people come here, they learn things, and then they move on to build their own pieces, their own businesses, their own brands, whatever it happens to be. And I love that too. I love seeing people kind of come to us bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and no idea what to do, and end up leaving here with a certain level of expertise that then translates into a career. And go back to agriculture. Agriculture was a dying craft. It really was. And this has re-inspired that agriculture. And we've had students that came through that are agricultural focused that are now moved on to lab positions paying more money than I made in technology. And so, again, it kind of just, it gives us a chance to watch its evolution.
Oh my gosh, and you, my friend, are a big part of that evolution. I was thinking about that proverb, plant seeds to trees that you'll never know the shade of, and that's exactly what you're doing. You have, in the best way, no idea how inspired these people are, all the inspiration that they've gotten, where they're going to go, and then the people they're going to be able to, inspire as they move forward. So it's this really great, ripple effect and this cross-pollination of, people you meet and people that continue to go. And I was thinking with the future of cannabis and hemp, what are some of the things that you're looking at, not only from a state perspective, but for a federal perspective? What do you hope for 2024 and beyond?
I'm all about the minor molecules, right? So I'm all about those minors. So I look forward to the discovery of all these news as we continue to discover them. I look forward to the studies that actually tell us and prove to us what they're doing. That's a huge portion for me, one I'm majorly excited about. I think at the same time, textiles are really starting to become, and this. I mean, you were one of the first people to do fiber. But I really think what you started years ago is now starting to get legs on a national level. And I think I'm excited we're going to start to do a little bit of work and some grant work and some work with a couple of farmers on fiber. So next year we're going to be busting it out. And this year we spent a lot of time on looking at decortication and looking at how to be cost effective in being able to manufacture the product. I think that brings about everything from people making clothing to people making shoes to people making paper. And so it expands the diversity of what this crop is at the same time. I look forward to a lot of these college professors are actually tying back into the industry in a very different way. So the seed studies we're doing with Eastern, the studies on the endocannabinoid system and what parts are actually processing what cannabinoids and with what carriers as opposed to what blockers. It's so filled with just amazing knowledge and experience. And so I'm kind of just, we've lived in our box of extraction and in product manufacturing, and I think this really is going to be the year of the box turning into a cube of multiple parts, right? So now I'm not going to be one box. It's going to be a Rubik's cube with lots of boxes that we got to figure out how to put them all together, But this year I think is really going to be a growth and expansion year for the industry. We're also going to see a compression, from a cannabis perspective, the value, the cost. We're going to see a compression in the industry, especially in Mass. We're already feeling it heavily, but it becomes good partners. It becomes having the right people at your side, the right team. It becomes having the right business partners. You're an anchor for all of us in the sense that when it's time for us to do a re-education, boom, you're there. Boom, you're letting us know. Boom, you're putting it in place. If that wasn't there as a method or a mechanism, it would be a difficult thing to begin to traverse and then trust. And so I look forward to what people have thrown their anchors out and which ones are actually going to stick and hold on. You know, so I think this year is going to be really a big year of new innovations and those that offer something of true value being able to survive.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. You're not only going to survive, you're going to thrive, my friend. And especially I love how we talk about with cannabis and textiles. For a lot of people, this might be new information, but as you and I know, we're really digging up history. We're looking through and seeing what have we forgotten, because we've forgotten really more than we're going to. In some ways, we're going to innovate in in ways they could never, just because of technology, distribution, and things like that. But really looking back and seeing, well, what did our ancestors do? And especially, I love that you do that with not only, your agriculture, but your hemp production, thinking about how do we give back to the plant? How do we use every part of the plant? How do we you make all these wonderful hemp, not like hemp plastic products. So how important is it that as a society, with all these different, you know how much individualized plastic it takes to wrap an individualized joint? You got to put the joint in the container, you got to put stickers on the container, you got to put the container in a box, you got to label the box, you got to put a sticker on the box. So all these single-use plastics, where do you think we could benefit from anything in maybe one way more than another when it comes to hemp, or specifically when we start to look at hemp plastic and how you're very much on the forefront of that? Do you think more and more states and companies are going to start to say, hey, how do we look to our small farmers to get there? Just to buy your biomass could really make the planet a better place.
You know, I'll be real. Um, uh,
To me.
I don't think people care. And if they did, they would jump in front of things like the new law in Connecticut. The new law in Connecticut says I can only have 5 milligrams per package. I could still make my gummies. I could still put them in single packages, and I could still, now I have to sell 10 packages for the equivalent of what my one was.
Mm.
Every bit of math that they put out there, the reality is I could make a 15 mil tincture and I could make it strong and have 25 milligrams. And there's so many ways to skirt around things. And all we're doing right now from a law-based perspective is increasing the amount of plastics that are needed. We're standing in the way of being able to truly be sustainable. It's what you said. I use the extract. I use parts of the material that I extract. So the fats, the waxes, the lipids, I use those on a fire starter. I add that thick, dense, and it's a tar. It's a biotar. We actually use it to patch our roofs. We use it to patch the gutters. If there's a small hole that forms in the gutter over the summer, it's literally a biotar. However, it's completely flammable. And so it will hold a light for 7 to 10 minutes. So if I add it back into the hemp herd, it's going to automatically become a fire starter. And in fact, I just lit one that had been outside for over 2 years, and it's still lit and burned amazingly. And so I think in the THC world, everything has to be considered a bio waste and has to be destroyed. And so, you know, there's the hemp leaf, there's the leaf, the fan leaf, right? Huge value to that leaf. Huge. There's omegas, there's irons, there's amazing things that are within that, but we got to trash it. The stalk, you know, we're talking about hemp fiber. The stalk itself is an amazing thing for the bedding of a coop, whether it be chicken or rabbit or something else. It's antimicrobial. It fights off standard funguses and other things. The root itself, the soil, the sustainability behind the soil, all of these people have to trash this stuff. They have to consider it a biohazard, which is absurdity. So our entire industry right now is abandoning the concept of sustainability, which is actually why we formed the Connecticut Cannabis Sustainability Council with Eastern, because we're really trying to change the dynamic and change the understanding of what that concept of sustainability really is. We have to use less plastic. We have to. We have to. Now, glass is heavier, and it costs more for us, for as a whole, as a whole. And so, you know, we have to push into demanding that these things are done. And it has to. If people do care, and I said I don't think they really do because I don't see them taking the appropriate action. I see them boycotting things because it's cool, but I don't see them actually demanding change. if every person that walked into a dispensary and bought 5 pre-rolls, each in their own individual tube, and had nowhere to throw them, and sent an email to the CCC or the Department of Consumer Protection and say, hey, this amount of waste is absurd, it would be something that's changed. In this state, there's almost 500 people that walk through a dispensary in a single day.
Really?
500. And so if every one of those people had sent a letter in literally days, this would change. So I pray people care. I don't think they do. And one way or another, in our advocacy, we need to demand this. We need to demand a change here.
Absolutely. And I think it's sparking these conversations because maybe a lot of people, and I agree that sometimes it's like, do you not know or do you not care? Because those are two very
Mm-hmm.
separate problems. So
Yeah.
we got to figure out, is it ignorance or is it malice? And when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
our governing bodies, it might be a little bit of both. So with that in mind,
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about how you need to stay active, you need to stay vocal, and I am so inspired and I have so much admiration for what you do and what you continue to do and how you continue to shape our emerging industry. I am constantly inspired by what I see from you, Mr. Michael Goodenough, from your team, from your companies, from your advocacy, and your ability to say, you know what, you've made things a little bit more challenging on this side, so I'm going to go around. I'm going to figure it out. Like you're not, you have a indomitable spirit of not giving up and realizing that not only will this pass, but if it, as it starts to pass, we got to make sure that we make sure it doesn't happen again. So I think that all the advocacy work you're doing and all the businesses and all the education is going to compile itself later in ways, in very positive ways that we haven't even foreseen just yet. So I am really excited to continue to grow with you and to continue to watch you grow and watch your business thrive and all these wonderful things, even through incredible adversity with your own governing body being the primary problem. So in our last, if you can believe it, our last 15 minutes, what are some of like the parting words, or what are some of the things that help you continue to stay motivated, especially when things are looking a little bit insane as far as legislation and application?
It hit me lately. Yeah, I think a lot of people are suffering through a lot of different types of depression. I think coming out of the COVID side, reallocate, re-engaging with community. There's just a lot, right? And so we're living our dream. How freaking lucky are we? And who the hell are you to bitch about your dream not being what you expected it to be? This is what you asked for. This is where you asked to be. And so I don't know. For me, I just got to keep telling myself I'm living my dream. And sometimes those dreams end up being a little bit of a nightmare, and sometimes they end up being real dysfunctional, and sometimes, but it's what you said. It's about consistency. It's about evolution. It's about it's about being a part of the chaos in order to appreciate the beauty. And so for me, that's a lot of what I'm constantly trying to remind myself of.
Oh, well, it's beautiful and wonderful getting to do it with you. I know that as a point of sanity, I would not be here without you. I definitely like to make that point that it can feel like it's when the way the legislation gets proposed, that you would think that the left hand is not talking to the right, because they're not. Because when you look at the way that
Mm-hmm.
things need to be implemented in a way for them to be successful for longevity, not only for corporations, but for smaller mom or pops, we want to make sure that the disconnect doesn't happen. So I definitely think that they're going to start listening to your advocacy group. I definitely think that the different work in the groups that you're doing right now are things that the Department of Consumer Protections, as the years continue to unfurl, that'll definitely hopefully be agencies that they reach out to prior to making any sort of legislative changes. So I really think that it is the start of a beautiful thing in the state of Connecticut with these groups, even though it came out of a lot of adversity. And with that in mind, where can we find you? You have two beautiful brick and mortar locations. I am honored that I've been to both. I've gotten to go to Connecticut and see your incredible farm, and I've been out to Becket, Massachusetts, and I've seen your beautiful dispensary, Himalayan High. So, can you tell us a little bit about these two locations? And I might have lost our friend. He's walking around on the farm. Or maybe there was something that happened in a good way. Maybe your employee just had like a question. And I am alone. All right. I'll give it a sec. I bet our friend pops on back. And then with that, with our last 10 minutes, I'll ask him about his shop, following up, and then yeah, that'll be awesome. We're ending a little bit abruptly, but that's okay. I'm gonna pause it, and then when he comes on back, I'm gonna start again. Our dear friend, Mr. Michael Goodenough, is off at the farm, so I'm going to close this podcast and thank him so much for being here, for his time, for his work, for his continued works. And if you want to go and support Mr. Michael Goodenough, you can go to his incredible farm in Connecticut, or you can go to Becket, Massachusetts, and support Himalayan High, which is a 21 plus retail shop in Mass. So Massachusetts, Connecticut, taking over the East Coast, the United States, and globally. You can find our good friend, Mr. Michael Goodenough at Sweetheal, Becket High. And thank you all so much for listening to the second Legacy and Legal podcast.